out of the crowd for such a compliment. Sometimes, the only time you can see growth is when someone points it out to you, especially in a situation such as a Way Corp, where you're never sure of anything except what the leadership tells you. The rest of the block was uneventful as I finished out the rest of the block in the kitchen. The next block brought us new job assignments, and of course we had to change rooms again. I was thankful that I would no longer be in food services. All the jobs that were there, this one was the most taxing. For some reason, the leadership tried to get as many people to do food services as possible. As with anything else, there was some spiritual reason, I'm sure. My new job would last the next 2 blocks and was to be in the tool shed. An 11th Corpsman, Kevin, and I were responsible to keep the hand mowers and the tools clean and in working order. Spring had sprung in Emporia, and it would not be long until our first year would be over. There was also new activities such as light bearers. This program was where everyone in the Way Corp on all the campuses would go out into parts of the country to recruit people into the Way by signing them up for PFAL classes. Teams of 4 would live with WOW ambassadors or others believers for 2 weeks. It was seen as a great privilege to house the Way Corp during this time. Rose and I were sent out with another couple from the 11th Corps, Jim and Cindy. Jim was our twig leader for the block and was also a musician in one of the Way Corp bands. I thought this would be a wonderful experience to be with them and learn. Our assignment took us to Omaha, Nebraska. There we would be staying in the 12th Corps woman and her WOW family. Once we arrived there, we immediately got the lay of the land and set out to win the city over. We were having a difficult time finding interested people. After the first week, we had a coffee house and an explanation of the PFAL class. We invited people to come and learn more about what we were offering. 6 new people showed up and signed up for the PFAL class. We all signed at least one person up for the class during the 2 weeks, except for Jim, who was having a tough time. We returned to campus after our 2 weeks. Many had not fared as well as Rose and I had. The leadership was livid that better results had not been obtained. They decided to send everyone out who had not signed someone up for the PFAL class, because this was a departure from the schedule and there were so many to send. They would send half out, and then after 2 weeks would send out the other half. Thankfully, Rose and I were spared the wrath of the leadership in this instance, but we had other problems with which to contend. Excuse me. We were having major difficulties getting the rest of our tuition paid. We were scrambling to find the money needed to finish out the year. We were being turned down by everyone we spoke to. Finally, we were told we would have to leave the Way Corp the next day. Rose put a call into Grace. Her mom said she would come up with the money under the condition I call my parents first to see if they would help out. I reluctantly called my parents. My mother answered, and I told her of our plight. As I begged for them to reconsider their position about the Way, she remained unmoved. I hung up the phone, disgusted and hurt. I told Rose the result of the conversation, and she called her stepmother back. She was very sympathetic with me and concerning my fractured relationship with my parents. She then told us she would be sending the money for us to complete our year of training. We went back to leadership and told them we had secured our financing for the rest of the year. And they expressed how wonderful it was God had come through for us. They said it was our continued believing that had made it possible. We thought that having this issue resolved would make life a lot easier. This didn't last long, because Rose and I were required to meet with the Corps leader's wife, Jean, about 3 weeks later. When we arrived at the meeting, she started immediately screaming at us about our marriage and our lives. She accused us of things that were wrong with our marriage. I had no way of knowing where she had gotten the information that she confronted us with. I thought Rose might have gone and talked with her. I did not know when this would have happened except for work. We were always together. She told us we had 2 weeks to shape up or we would be shipped out. When we got back to our room, we had a heart-to-heart talk, or at least I did. I told Rose things I never told anyone else to help her understand me. Rose really didn't say too much, but agreed we had to come up with a plan we could present to Jean. We figured out a plan on how we were going to change our lifestyles to exemplify a believer and a Way Corp marriage. And Rose said she would talk with Jane the next day. After 2 weeks, we were brought in for another meeting. This time, Jane jumped all over Rose for being hard-hearted and unforgiving. She was satisfied with our plan, though, and she told us we had better stick with it. I came out of the meeting with mixed emotions. I felt betrayed by Rose because I figured that apparently she had gone to Jane without ever trying to talk to me. There was a degree of satisfaction when Jane had so harshly confronted Rose, as I could not have gotten away with it. I felt thankful someone had cared enough to confront us. At the same time, I felt an underlying resentment that someone was butting into our affairs without being invited. But of course, those are thoughts and feelings that you would take to your grave rather than tell someone and suffer the rebuke of being unthankful, or worse, unspiritual. Later, I learned the same thing had happened to all the married couples at the same time. I did not know Jane received the information, how Jane received the information on all these couples, but looking back, I have my suspicions. Our rooms would be kept unlocked at all times. It would not have been difficult to have for them to go into our rooms to read the journals we were supposed to keep. After I was out of the group, I found this to be the case in other situations. It is only my opinion, but it is quite probable this is what happened. Similar incidents that happened during this time showed the mentality of the leadership as a whole. Now President Martindale had come to visit the campus to have a chance to spend time with the Corps. Before he had become the president of the Way, he had been the director of the Way Corp. During his stay, it was requested by leadership that everyone needed to have twig meetings for one reason or another. The only time we could fit it in was in the morning before breakfast. Most of the Way Corp decided we would meet at about 6 in the morning. At breakfast that morning, Martindale rebuked us for not being up early, doing our core requirements of reading the Bible and praying. As he carried on about lazy, ungrateful we were, and how much the leadership sacrificed their lives for us, I raised my hand. After he recognized me, I stood up and stated what had happened that morning, which would explain why most of the rooms were dark. After I had finished, he carried on a little while longer, saying that even if this were the case, he knew there were some who had not gotten up that morning. He finished by saying that my point had been taken. After I had spoken, people looked at me as if I had a death wish. They could not believe I had done this. I shrugged my shoulders and explained it was only right that if he was wrong, he should know about it so he would not falsely accuse us. The same week, we were having chicken for dinner. The dining room was set in such a way that there would be a host or hostess at each table. The person designated would be responsible for making sure the condiments and various other things were passed around. In the middle of the table there was a plurality bowl, so people could put things in that they did not want. This would then be passed around once everyone was finished. There was a head table where the core leadership sat to eat. This was set up like a table in a restaurant with two people that would serve the table. During all of our meals we were to practice Christian etiquette. This was the reason for the host or hostess, and this was practiced at every meal. We were required to do this in order to be able to eat in elegant settings with confidence. One of the things required was to put the knife, fork, and spoon in a certain way on the plate when an individual was finished eating, as well as not putting our elbows on the table. Martindale had finished eating and was walking through the dining room. As he walked around, he was adjusting the flatware on people's plates. Some of the people were not even finished eating, but he stopped after he moved their utensils. After about 10 minutes of this, he went to the microphone and started to rebuke us again. He pointed out it showed how ungrateful we were to our leaders when we decided not to practice our training in fine dining. The leadership was making every effort to teach us manners so we would not embarrass ourselves when eating with dignitaries. Everything and every action we were taught to do was designed to make sure we'd have free course to teach the word in any type of situation. The ironic part to this was if one would watch the leadership eating at the head table, you would want to replace their plates with a trough. It seemed that those who set the rules broke every one. It was to be expected, since they paid their dues in training and now could do what they wanted. When needed, they could act and do the appropriate things if the situation arose. The leadership attitude seemed to be one of do what I say, not as I do. Friday mornings we were told the corps director On Friday morning, we were told by the corps director we would be having a drive-in movie. We would not be using real cars, though we were going to make them out of whatever we could find. The vehicles could not be one-sided cutouts. They had to be made so we could get in them. We could either go together with other people or build the cars or make our own. The single women's names were put in a hat and the single men drew out a name, and in some cases two. The men were responsible for making the vehicles and the women could help if they wanted. That morning and afternoon, about 200 men were scouring the dumpsters in stores throughout Emporia for cardboard and other items they would need to complete the project. Early Saturday, everyone started putting his or her vehicles together. I was able to get some cardboard from a friend who had extra and made a sports car in which we could fit. At 7 that evening, all the men were to get in their cars and shuffle to the dorm buildings to escort their dates to the cars. Once in the car, we were to make our way to the dance being held outside, behind Werwell Library. After the dance, we would then get back into our cars and make our way to a drive-in that had been set up. At about 7, I went and got my sports car and went to our dorm building. I then went up and escorted Rose to the car. We then both grabbed the side and made our way to the dance. After we rounded the corner of the library, there were people dressed as police officers directing traffic. They showed us where to park. We went into the place where the band was playing. There was an announcement that anyone that danced a set number of dances would get aerobic points. This was the only way they could get the corpsmen to dance, short of threatening bodily harm. And you know something, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to read another chapter or two, and then we're going to cut out for this evening. At dusk set in, we were directed to get back into